Good morning. Thank you for hearing me today. Um, the proposed 2021 budget is insufficient, disappointing, and without vision. It clearly shows that Mayor Bowman and Council are uninterested and unwilling to listen to the concerns of constituents and to take the steps needed to invest in services that constituents need most, steps that are crucial to improving the quality of life in our city. In short, this budget tells constituents that their priorities are not valued by the current municipal government, and that's a huge problem. Last year, hundreds of Winnipeggers spoke to City Council about what they wanted to see in a city budget. We heard that people wanted investments in communities, not cops and concrete. We heard calls for a robust, affordable public transit system. We heard calls for approaches to saving our tree canopy, and we heard passionate calls for investment in libraries, pools, and leisure guide funding. In the 2020 Budget Engagement Survey, Winnipeggers identified medical response, community livability, and public transit as the three most important services the city provides. And yet the priorities we're seeing from Council in this budget reflect none of these priorities, with cuts to transit, active transportation, and further investment in roads and police. The things that bring the least value in any sense of the word to our city. As it stands, the Executive Policy Committee is advancing a budget that reflects none of the community engagement they've facilitated. Some might say the EPC fails to walk the talk. As of the end of 2019, Winnipeg had just under $12 billion of infrastructure, which is depreciated by about $7.6 billion over the years. In 2018, Winnipeg's infrastructure depreciated by $266.6 million, which works out to an average replacement cycle of about 26 years. However, we know from the 2020 infrastructure plan that the actual replacement value of all the city's assets is $35 billion, and with nearly 90% of that being roads and pipes. So to keep up with depreciation and maintain our infrastructure, we'll need to set aside $1.3 billion per year, roughly half the city's capital budgets from the last 10 years. Our city has a net financial position of approximately negative $841.8 million, a number that has only been plunging over the last 10 years. Even if we cut all city services, pools, libraries, firefighters, police, garbage pickup, councilor salaries, everything, we still have a budget shortfall of roughly $600 million. To quote from the 2017 City of Winnipeg Annual Report, the city has a structural deficit in the tax-supported operating budget. The city was most recently able to balance its 2018 tax-supported operating budget in large part by reducing transfers of cash to capital from operating to capital. But this is not sustainable in the long term. Believe it or not, the situation has not improved since 2018. So we can't afford to pay for the infrastructure we have, and the province is totally unwilling to bail us out. What are we to do then? It would seem from this budget that Council has no idea, so I brought a few ideas here to help you. When we cut transit service, when we don't clear snow from sidewalks, and when we choose not to build a network of protected bike lanes, we end up pushing more people to drive, which uses a lot more infrastructure than the alternatives of walking, biking, and busing. Conversely, a 2010 study of the CUTA showed a return of $3.37 for each $1 spent on public transportation, and a 2014 study by the APTA showed a return of $3.70. New York City calculated that for every $1 they spent on tree planting and care provides them $5.60 in benefits. The city of Halifax found that for every $1 they spent on trees returned them $8. A 2012 study of over 50 US cities reported a return of investment of $11.80 for each $1 spent on walking and cycling projects. And the same study estimated that twice as many jobs are created with active transportation projects as opposed to road projects. If Council is truly hoping to eventually get out of this downward spiral of service cuts and leave Winnipeg in a better place at the end of their careers, then we need to prioritize investments that bring value to the city, both in terms of money and quality of life. We need to invest in things that have been proven to improve people's lives, reduce crime, and that help us meet our climate goals. According to Winnipeg's Climate Action Plan, residential vehicles make up 32.1% of Winnipeg's greenhouse gas emissions and are also the single largest source of emissions. Transit, on the other hand, only accounts for 0.8% of emissions. Cutting from active transportation, relying on federal funds to bolster transit, using deceptive reporting to make it seem like the city's investing in transit, and continuing to expand the city's physical footprint indicates that council does not really have a vision for the city, especially not a vision with climate change in mind. To meet the necessary climate reduction targets, we need to make it easy for people to take the bus, cycle all year round, and walk safely on ice-free sidewalks. Nearly 85% of the public works capital budget is going solely to street renewal. That's 85% of our money that's going to the least safe, least efficient, least environmentally aware, least accessible, and least sustainable mode of transportation we have available to us. Yes, buses and bikes use roads, but they cause wear at much lower rates, meaning that the money we do invest in street renewal will go further. People are much more likely to cycle if there's infrastructure there for them to do it safely, and cycling infrastructure is much cheaper and lasts longer than roads for cars. People overwhelmingly take the bus to Jets and Bombers games, people who would never take the bus otherwise, because it is the cheapest, easiest, and most efficient way to get there. If council invested to make busing and cycling the easiest and most efficient option citywide, it would benefit us all in myriad ways. This investment would improve not only the physical health of residents, but also the financial health of our city and lower crime rates by allowing people to more easily access jobs and other resources. Furthermore, public transit can create and maintain jobs more quickly than other transportation investments. A study of the effects of the largest economic stimulus in the United States after the Great Recession found that public transport investments generated 31% more jobs per dollar than new construction of roads and bridges. Vancouver, Victoria, Nanaimo, Saskatoon, Brandon, Kingston, Peterborough, Timmins, St. John's, Halifax, Hamilton, Kingston, Mississauga, Guelph, Edmonton, and Montreal all implemented fare-free transit during the first lockdown to encourage social distancing. Between the climate crisis and our city's insolvency and the pandemic, now is the time to truly invest in and revolutionize Winnipeg's transit system. This investment also includes improving road allocation by expanding preferred bus lanes, customer experience and safety by eliminating fares, and increasing capacity by expanding the frequency and breadth of service. At this moment today, we are in the midst of a global pandemic, a worsening climate crisis, an economic downturn, and significant social upheaval. We're far past the time for half measures, good intentions, and empty promises. Council, as leaders in and representatives of our community, have a choice on how your legacies will be reflected on. You can stay in the pockets of Manitoba heavy construction and the police, dig our city further into debt, climate inaction, and inequity, or you can be part of the city council that actually chose to make a change for the better by investing in things that make our communities more livable and vibrant, by investing in the things that are important to your constituents. I demand that you reject the cuts to transit, go back to the drawing board, and budget with constituents' feedback and the long-term health of our city in mind. It is not only what is necessary and responsible, it's what's right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel Friesen, for the presentation. Colleagues, Councillor Chambers.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel, for your presentation. I heard you correctly in stating that you want a cut to the roads budget?
I don't necessarily want to cut to the roads budget. I want the money to be allocated so that the money is funding projects that have more economic and social benefits. So funding active transportation with the money for that, like Mark from Bike Winnipeg was saying, they're making sure that whenever we're renewing a road, we're putting in active transportation infrastructure. You know, that hasn't been happening, especially like on Roblin, even though that's a rule that the city has, that's supposed to be something that's happening. You know, we're seeing that that's just not a priority and that needs to change.
So you're saying more active transportation in terms of our infrastructure?
More active transportation, more transit. So perhaps moving money from road renewal to transit and thinking that as part of the road renewal budget, because when buses transport more people more densely, then cars don't wear down the roads as quickly. And then we get more money for the money that we're investing in our transport renewal. So it's a very simple, well-documented concept that when you move a lot of people in a small space in one vehicle, it wears down the roads less than a bunch of people in other vehicles by themselves. So yeah, it's just real common sense stuff.
Thank you.